So last week we covered a story about a close call off the coast of Korea. You had a North Korean ship drift into South Korean water, and then that led to South Korea firing some warning shots in the near vicinity of the North Korean ship. That was a tense situation, especially because we learned just before that North Korea had reopened a place where they were making nukes. So you had weapons development going on in North Korea, very close call on the water. It was a story that sort of flew under the radar a little bit. I didn't see many outlets talk about it. There were only a few, even print outlets, that ran stories on it. Well, now we have some more breaking news on North Korea and South Korea. The New York Times says, North Korea tested an intercontinental ballistic missile, Japan said, escalating tensions with the U.S. The missile flew for 71 minutes and landed in Japanese waters. An official said it's the first such launch since 2017. So that's an ICBM. And that is, well, they said there was one of these in 2017, but as far as I knew, that was more capability than I realized that they had. So clearly they've been working on this stuff. They've had some pretty shitty attempted missile launches relatively recently where the things blew up instantly. This did not. This actually worked. And of course, in theory, this has the ability to reach the United States of America, and they're ramping up tests. That appears obvious. Now, there's unfortunately another aspect to this story, which is in response to what North Korea did with that missile test, a successful missile test, South Korea test-fired missiles from the ground, sea, and air in a show of strength after it. I don't like it, man. I don't like it. This is escalating. So the reason why, if anything, the South Korean test concerns me a little more, I know that sounds crazy to say, but hear me out, is because I don't know if North Korea has the technology and the ability to know when a test missile launch is indeed a test missile launch. I fear that test missile launches from South Korea might be misinterpreted by North Korea as offensive attacks, and then that would lead in North Korea them to launch what they think is a defensive attack, but in reality would be an offensive attack. So this is scary times, man. Now, I do want to say, and this is an opinion that's outside of the mainstream, I don't know if I've ever heard anybody voice this opinion, certainly on mainstream media, on TV, but what everybody needs to understand is that North Korea is a tiny country with a dead economy, effectively. It's one of the poorest nations in the world, if not the poorest. It's totally locked down. Of course, it's an authoritarian dictatorship, but Kim Jong-un, just like his predecessors, all he's concerned about is the survival of the regime. The idea that he has territorial expansion goals is preposterous. He has nowhere near the amount of money needed for that, nowhere near the amount of military capability needed for that, nowhere near the technology needed for that. So there is no offensive threat from North Korea. You have to think of Kim Jong-un in a similar way to people thought of Muammar Gaddafi, which is, yeah, he's crazy. He's a psycho. The way he runs the country is eyebrow raising. And to put it kindly, I mean, obviously there's credible accounts of concentration camps in North Korea and things of that nature. But there is going to be no offensive attack launched from Kim Jong-un on Seoul, South Korea. It's just not going to happen. And I think this is something that's actually admitted internally by the Pentagon and our intelligence agencies. In fact, there was a story in The Intercept years back that highlighted that fact. But again, it's not something that is really ever voiced in corporate media. Only The Intercept in terms of print has actually run with that story. And that's the point that I want to stress here, is that no matter what kind of missile test they're doing, no matter how much they up their technological capability, everybody needs to understand they're trying to flex to the world and say, look, we have a deterrent, don't fuck with us, don't overthrow us. But unfortunately, I often feel like the way that the West reacts, and even in this instance, the way that South Korea in particular reacts, they're trying to show like, hey, we think you guys are being offensive, so now we're going to do a defensive display of force, and we're going to launch our own test to let you know who's boss and to let you know that you need to stay in your lane. And again, I just want to stress, there would be no offensive attack against the U.S. from North Korea. There would be no offensive attack against South Korea from North Korea. So my message to the West in particular is to www.chill.com. You don't need to retaliate to show your force. He understands how much force South Korea has. He understands how much force the United States of America has. So, and again, don't misinterpret what I'm saying. I think it's also obviously the case Kim Jong-un should stop with his missile tests, should stop developing more powerful weapons, should obviously not have concentration camps. I mean, that's like the most obvious point in the world to make ever. Should free up his country, shouldn't be a dictator, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, all these things are obvious, but my perspective in giving you guys this story is to let you know that if you are in the West, if you're Joe Biden, or if you're in the government of South Korea, understand, even though he's a psychopath, he's a menace to his own population, he's not really a menace to others because he has no territorial expansion goals, and even if he did, he couldn't make that come to fruition. So this is all an attempt for him to show, I have a deterrent, you guys can't attack me. I have a deterrent, you guys can't attack me. But again, my fear is, in the midst of everything that's going on in the world right now, miscommunication and misunderstanding could actually lead to a hot war. So when the North Korean ship drifted into South Korean waters and they fired the warning shots, what if that accidentally hit them? Or what if they interpreted it as they're actually attacking us, they're not firing warning shots, and then they fire on South Korea? Boom, you have a huge international crisis. So everybody needs to take it down a few notches. Like, I understand there's a good defensive argument for why South Korea should maybe show some power after North Korea shows their power with their missile launch, but I would argue he already knows what you guys got. You can reel it in a little bit. Let's not do that test and then sit there and, there's a possibility that he doesn't realize it's a test and then he launches back in what he thinks is defensive but is an offensive strike. So everybody reel it in, man. Everybody reel it in. Everything's coming apart at the seams when you're looking at the global situation right now with conflicts in various countries. Of course, the Russian invasion and war on Ukraine, et cetera, et cetera. So not good times, man. Not good times. Everybody needs to take it down a couple notches. I'm going to steal an argument from a bunch of hippies, and I think Joe Rogan has also made this point before too. Why can't we get all the world leaders in a room, man, and everybody has shrooms? And everybody's like, bro, I'm a lot more loving than I thought I was. Come give me a hug. I mean, I'm largely kidding, but I'm also not kidding. Everybody, please chill the fuck out.